I found out my fiancé was cheating on me the same night I found out someone was preparing to send me to prison. That's not an exaggeration. That's exactly what happened. And the part that still messes with my head is this. I didn't discover it from a phone call, a text message, or some anonymous tip. I found out while standing in the rain, holding an engagement ring in my pocket like an idiot. To this day, I still think the scariest thing in the world isn't being betrayed. It's realizing everyone else already knew, and you were the last person still living inside the lie. 3 years. 3 years together. 3 years of late nights, canceled plans, skipped weekends, and telling myself all the sacrifices would be worth it someday. In my mind, Brooke wasn't just my girlfriend. She was home. She was the person I trusted more than myself. And Garrett? Garrett was my boss. The man who pulled me up from being just another engineer. The man who sat in my apartment drinking beer with me. The man who slapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're doing great, Caleb. You're going places." Brooke trusted him too. I trusted him too. Which made perfect sense back then. Looking back now, it makes me sick. It was our 3-year anniversary. Seattle was getting hit with one of those cold rains that makes the whole city look blurry through a windshield. I left work early, picked up the ring I'd ordered 2 months earlier, and spent half the drive rehearsing a proposal out loud like a complete idiot. I turned the music off because I couldn't focus. I checked my hair in the mirror at a red light. I reached into my jacket pocket 4 different times just to make sure the ring box was still there. I even remember smiling to myself and thinking, damn, I'm really doing this. I still want to punch that version of me in the face. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes early and stood outside under the awning while rainwater ran off the edge beside me. I pulled out my phone to text Brooke. I typed, "I'm here." Deleted it. Typed, "Where are you?" Deleted that too. I wanted everything to be perfect. Then I looked up and saw Brooke through the glass. I recognized her instantly, not by her face, by the way she held a glass with both hands whenever she was waiting for someone. 3 years with someone teaches you stupid little things like that. But the man sitting across from her wasn't me. It was Garrett. I remember my brain refusing to accept it. Seriously. It started making excuses before I even had a chance to think. Maybe it was work. Maybe they ran into each other. Maybe I was overreacting. Human beings do that. When reality hurts too much, your mind lies to protect you first. Then, Garrett reached over, touched Brooke's face, and she smiled. Not just smiled. She gave him that quiet little smile, the one she used to give me. Then, she leaned forward and kissed him. I dropped my phone, actually dropped it, and when I bent down to pick it up, my hand slipped the first time because suddenly my fingers weren't working right. But somehow, that still wasn't the worst part. A few seconds later, Garrett pulled a folder onto the table. At first, I barely looked at it. Then he turned it slightly. Harbor Point, my project. $15 million. My chest tightened instantly. I stepped closer. Then he flipped to the last page, and I saw my name, Caleb Hayes. Underneath it was my signature, or something almost identical to it. And right there, standing in the rain, I felt something colder than betrayal. Because suddenly, everything started connecting. The missing emails, the meetings Garrett stopped inviting me to, the times Brooke kept asking strange questions about my project. Every damn thing. I wasn't standing outside a cheating scandal. I was standing outside a plan. A plan designed to bury my career, my future, maybe even my entire life. And the strangest part? I didn't storm inside. I didn't lose my mind. I just took one step back, then another. Because when someone betrays you deeply enough, you don't scream. You go numb. Then I pulled out my phone and called someone Garrett never expected me to know. There's a fear worse than being cheated on by the person you love. It's the moment you realize your life started falling apart long before the disaster arrived. And the worst part? You saw the signs. You just explained them away. To this day, what still keeps me awake at night isn't Brooke kissing Garrett. It isn't the restaurant. It isn't even finding out someone wanted to turn me into the fall guy for $15 million. It's realizing I saw everything coming. I just kept choosing easier explanations. After that phone call, I stood outside in the rain for a long time. Cars kept moving behind me. People kept laughing. Seattle kept glowing like nothing happened. Only I stood there replaying the last 3 weeks over and over inside my head. Because before hanging up, the man on the phone said only one thing. Caleb, think carefully about the last 3 weeks. That's it. Then he hung up. And suddenly, something small flashed into my head. Not Brooke, not Garrett, not the kiss. A material code. One stupid little material code from 3 weeks earlier. Funny thing is, people don't destroy your life all at once. They start small. Small enough that questioning it makes you feel paranoid. 3 weeks before our anniversary, strange things started happening around Harbor Point. Not disasters, not screaming meetings, just tiny things. Emails disappearing from message chains, update timestamps changing, numbers slightly off, little mistakes. Back then I kept telling myself the same thing. Big projects always have problems. Every engineer tells himself that. I remember that night clearly. Almost 7. Most of the office lights were already off. Only a few desks in engineering were still lit. The coffee beside me had gone cold hours earlier. I took a sip and immediately regretted it. Honestly, I just wanted to go home. Take a shower, eat something, sleep. That's it. Then I saw it. One line. One steel code. I remember actually leaning closer toward the screen. Then closer again. Premium structural steel had been replaced. Second grade steel. At first I wasn't scared. I was irritated. Really irritated. Like walking into your apartment and realizing somebody moved the picture frame on your wall half an inch. Nobody else notices. But you do, because something feels touched. Then I started opening old files. Engineering, drawings, reports, cost sheets. One after another. And slowly, I sat up straighter. Because separately, everything looked small. Together, something felt wrong. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to make my stomach feel cold. Then I printed everything and walked toward Garrett's office. And to this day, I still remember my hand stopping on the doorknob. No reason, no explanation, just one of those moments where your body notices danger before your mind does. But I opened the door anyway. Garrett looked up, looked at me, looked at the folder, and for exactly 1 second, he stopped smiling. Then the smile came back, fast, too fast. I remember asking, Garrett, who changed the steel category. Silence. Then right before he answered, I heard heels in the hallway. Click, click, click. Brooke. And back then, that sound made me feel relieved. Funny how memories work, because now, that sound still gives me chills. To this day, I still don't know what's more terrifying. Finding out my fiancé betrayed me, or realizing someone had already started using my name to destroy my life long before I knew the game had even started. Because what still keeps me awake at night isn't the $15 million. It isn't Garrett. It isn't even the image of Brooke sitting across from him in that restaurant. It's something much worse. It's realizing I saw the signs. I saw them. I felt them. And I helped explain them away myself. After that phone call, I stood outside in the rain while Seattle kept moving around me. Cars passed. People laughed. Traffic lights changed. Everything looked normal. Only my head wasn't. Because right before hanging up, the man said one thing. Caleb, think very carefully about the last 3 weeks. That's it. No explanation. No warning. Just that. And suddenly, my brain stopped replaying Brooke, stopped replaying Garrett, stopped replaying the restaurant. Instead, I remembered a feeling, not an event, a feeling. That strange feeling engineers get when something doesn't add up but they can't prove why. 3 weeks earlier, after I walked out of Garrett's office that night, something felt off. Not enough to scare me, just enough to stay with me. I remember going back to my desk and looking at my phone. Nothing from Brooke. I locked the screen. Unlocked it again 10 seconds later. Still nothing. Stupid thing. Human thing. When you love someone long enough, you start making excuses automatically. She's busy. She's driving. Maybe her phone died again. Funny thing is, while I was sitting there waiting for a message from Brooke, somewhere in the building someone was taking my life apart piece by piece. I remember opening the Harbor Point access records. Not because I was suspicious. Honestly, I don't even know why I opened them. Instinct, maybe. And that's when I noticed something strange. Tiny things. Small things. System activity under my credentials. At times, I couldn't remember logging in. Files opened. Approvals touched. Access records slightly off. Not impossible. Not enough for proof. But enough to make me sit a little straighter. Enough to make me stop checking my phone. Enough to make the room suddenly feel quieter. I remember looking up at the office around me. Almost everyone had gone home. Rows of empty desks. Half the lights already off. Air conditioning humming above me. And suddenly I had that weird feeling people get when they think they forgot something important. You know that feeling. When you're halfway home and suddenly wonder, did I lock the front door? Except this felt worse, because I wasn't thinking about a door. I was thinking about me, about my name, about my access, about things happening under my account that I couldn't remember doing. Then I looked at the clock. 7, 9, 7:21, 7:37. I still remember watching time pass and feeling my stomach slowly turn cold. Because separately, everything looked small. Together, it started feeling like someone standing behind you in a dark room. You don't see them. You just know something's there. Then I printed everything and walked toward Garrett's office. And to this day, I still remember my hand stopping on the doorknob. Because sometimes, your body notices danger before your mind does. But I walked in anyway. Garrett looked at me, looked at the folder, and for exactly 1 second, he stopped smiling. Then, right before he answered, I heard heels in the hallway. Click, click, Brooke. And the part that still makes me feel stupid is I actually felt relieved. Because back then I still believed something simple. When everything starts falling apart, the person you love stands beside you. I had no idea that only hours later, I would see an approval order under my name that I had never signed. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself, how long had someone else been living inside my account? The woman who slept beside me every night used my own hand to send me to prison. To this day, I still wish that sentence were an exaggeration. I really do. Because the most terrifying thing isn't being betrayed. It's realizing that the person who knows when you sleep, knows how exhausted you get, knows you forget to lock your phone, knows exactly how deeply you sleep, is also the person who knows exactly how to destroy your life. After seeing that my account had approved the order for the second-grade steal that night, I sat frozen in front of the screen for a long time. My name, my access credentials, my approval timestamp, everything was me. Except for one thing, I had never logged in. I had never signed anything. I had never touched the system that night. I still remember looking at the corner of the screen, 10:52 p.m., then looking back at the notification, then checking the clock again. I don't even know why. Like if I stared long enough, everything would somehow fix itself. Sounds stupid. But when people are in shock, the human mind always tries to find some mistake that proves reality isn't actually real. And the stupidest part was, even then, I was still trying to protect Brooke. After the restaurant, after the look between her and Garrett, after Brooke showed up at Garrett's office at the exact right moment, after she took the file from my hands, I still kept telling myself, no, Brooke couldn't do this. There has to be something I don't know yet. When you love someone long enough, you start doing strange things. You start rescuing them from suspicion, even while you're the one sinking. I still remember taking another sip of my coffee, then immediately making a face. It was ice cold, bitter in a way that made me cringe. There was even a thin layer of oil floating on top. Normally, I would have gotten up and dumped it out. But that night I just set it back down, then kept staring at the screen. The air conditioner above me kept humming. I heard an elevator door open somewhere down the hall. Someone laughed softly on a lower floor. Everything was normal. That was the terrifying part. Because sometimes your life is falling apart, while the world around you keeps moving like nothing happened. Then I looked over at the corner of my desk. The little plant was still there. I stared at it for a few seconds, and right then, my heart dropped. Because nearly a year earlier, after a few design files disappeared from my desk, I had hidden a tiny camera inside that plant. I had almost forgotten it existed, until that night. I still remember placing my hand on the mouse, then pulling it away, putting it back, then pulling it away again. Sounds ridiculous. But when you're scared, people stall. You check your phone, look at old messages, do anything just to delay opening the thing you're afraid to see. I even picked up my phone out of instinct. Brooke's last message was still there. Get some sleep early times. I stared at it for a few seconds, then locked the screen. Even now, thinking about it still gives me chills. It was close to midnight. I walked back from the parking garage to my floor at Harbor Point. The building was almost completely dark. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the hallway, louder than usual. I still remember missing the elevator button once, because my hand was shaking. Then I sat down at my desk, opened the camera footage, dragged the timeline back, pressed play. At first, nothing. The cleaning crew, hallway lights, an employee walking by. She den Lingbafen, she den Shisifen, she den Shidofen. Then at 11:23, Garrett walked into my office. Alone. He looked around, then smiled. Not a polite smile. The smile of someone who knew everything was going exactly according to plan. I still remember sitting up straighter, out of instinct, without thinking. A few seconds later, Brooke walked in. And to this day, I still remember exactly what that felt like. Not pain, not anger, just that sinking feeling, like missing a step in the dark. Your heart doesn't hurt, but your whole body turns cold. I remember whispering, "No." Even then, I still wanted to be wrong. Garrett pulled out 2 glasses of champagne, filled them. The 2 of them clinked glasses, right on my desk, right beside my tablet. Then Garrett laughed. He still has no idea what just happened. Brooke laughed. That small laugh I used to think belonged only to me. Then Garrett raised his glass. $5 million from one fingerprint scan. I've got to admit, you picked the perfect moment. And a few seconds later, I heard the sentence that made all the blood in my body run cold. Getting his fingerprint while he was asleep was easier than I thought. I don't remember if I blinked. I only remember the image that flashed into my head. A few nights earlier, I was lying asleep next to Brooke. So exhausted, I didn't know anything. And the woman I was going to marry used my own hand to sign my sentence. Then Brooke walked over, rested her head on Garrett's shoulder, smiled, and said, "When the police get involved, that idiot architect will take the entire fall. The scariest thing in the world isn't finding out someone betrayed you. It's realizing people started treating you differently before you even knew why. You've probably felt it before. You walk into a room, and something feels off. Not big things, small things. Someone suddenly stops talking. Someone avoids looking at you. Someone looks at you for half a second too long. And deep down, before your brain catches up, your body already knows. Something bad happened. You just haven't heard it yet." I understood that feeling the next morning. Not after the restaurant. Not after seeing Garrett and Brooke together. Not after watching the footage. The next morning. Because after seeing everything inside my office, I never went home. I couldn't. Home meant Brooke. And after hearing her laugh beside Garrett, after hearing her casually talk about stealing my fingerprint while I slept, I suddenly didn't know where home was anymore. So I stayed outside Harbor Point. I remember waking up in my car because my phone slid off my chest and hit the floor. For a few seconds, I just sat there, confused, still half asleep. I looked outside. Morning traffic, people walking, a guy carrying coffee, someone laughing across the street. Normal life, completely normal. And maybe that was the strangest part. Because when your own life starts collapsing, you expect the world to stop with you. But it doesn't. Then I looked down. My phone screen was still on. Brooke's last message was still there. Get some sleep early. Times I stared at it. Not because I missed her. Not because I believed her. Because my brain was doing something stupid. Something people do when they don't want reality to feel real. I kept trying to connect the woman in that message to the woman from the footage, and I couldn't. Then my phone rang. Garrett, 7:42 a.m. I stared at his name, actually stared at it, because Garrett only called early when Harbor Point had problems. Permits, contractors, structural issues. Something was always going wrong, and every single time. He sounded stressed, fast, impatient, like a man trying to put out a fire. But not today. Today he sounded calm, too calm. Emergency board meeting. 8:30. That was it. No explanation. Nothing. Just silence. Then the call ended, and I remember holding the phone afterward, feeling that cold feeling in my stomach again. Because suddenly I remembered Garrett raising that champagne glass in my office, smiling, relaxed, like a man who wasn't worried about anything. And right then, I understood something. Meetings solve problems. This felt like witnesses. The drive to Harbor Point took 15 minutes. I barely remember any of it, but I remember the lobby. Because the second I walked inside, I felt it. Not all at once. Little things. Reception got quiet. Two people looked at me, then quickly looked somewhere else. Someone pulled out their phone. Someone else lowered their voice. Tiny things. But tiny things become very loud when you're already scared. And suddenly, I understood something that terrified me more than Brooke, more than Garrett, more than prison. People already knew something. Some version of a story had already started spreading. And somehow, I was the last person hearing about my own life. I walked slowly toward the boardroom, past the Harbor Point project offices, past glass conference rooms, past people pretending not to stare. Then, I reached the doors, and right before I touched the handle, I heard Brooke crying. I froze, because for 3 years, I knew Brooke's voice better than my own. I knew her real laugh. I knew her fake laugh. I knew the tiny pause before she pretended something hurt. At least, I thought I did, because standing outside that room, listening to her cry through the door, for the first time in 3 years, I honestly couldn't tell anymore. Then I reached for the handle, and right before I opened the door, something happened that still bothers me now. Brooke suddenly stopped crying. Immediately. Like someone had walked into the room. Like someone had warned her. And for the first time that morning, I had one terrifying thought. They were waiting for me. Then I opened the door. The moment I walked into the Harbor Point boardroom, something felt wrong. Not because of Garrett, not because of Brooke, because nobody looked surprised to see me. That was the first thing I noticed. And it hit me immediately. Because if someone walks into a room accused of taking money, manipulating approvals, and risking a $15 million project, people react. They get angry. They ask questions. They stare. But not here. Here, people looked away. One board member suddenly became very interested in the papers in front of him. Someone adjusted their glasses. Someone picked up a coffee cup, then realized it was empty. Small things. Stupid things. But when you're scared, tiny things become very loud. Then I looked toward the screen. Harbor Point. My employee profile. Authorization confirmed. Fingerprint verified. Caleb Hayes. Everything sat neatly on the screen like somebody had spent all night preparing it. And honestly, that was the part that scared me. Because real disasters aren't clean. Real mistakes aren't organized. But setups are. Setups are polished. Garrett looked at me and gave a small nod. Not a smile. Not anger. Just that fake expression people wear when they're pretending to feel sorry for you. And for a second, my brain did something I still hate admitting. It remembered old Garrett, the guy sitting in my apartment drinking beer. The guy slapping me on the shoulder saying, "You're going places, Caleb." Funny thing about betrayal, your mind sees the truth, but memories show up late. Then Brooke stood up, and somehow that felt worse, because some stupid part of me still reacted. Not my mind, my body. 3 years together teaches you habits. For a split second, I thought she was walking toward me to help, to stop all of this, to tell everyone they were wrong. Instead, she walked beside me, rested her hand on my shoulder, and quietly said, "Caleb, please, don't make this harder. That's all. Not, you didn't do this. Not, I'll help you. Just don't make this harder." Then Garrett slowly pushed a folder across the table. Resignation papers. Beside it, a Harbor Point Company pen. And suddenly, the room got quiet. Not normal quiet. Waiting quiet. The kind of silence where everybody already thinks they know what happens next. I looked around. Nobody looked nervous. Nobody looked confused. Because they weren't waiting for the truth. They were waiting for me to surrender. Then I looked down at the company pen. And I remember almost reaching for it. Actually, almost reaching. Until something stopped me. Maybe instinct. Maybe anger. Maybe remembering Garrett raising that champagne glass in my office. I don't know. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out my own pen. The old metal fountain pen I'd carried for years. A gift from an old friend in cybersecurity. Nobody reacted. Not Garrett. Not Brooke. Nobody. To everyone else. It was just a pen. I uncapped it slowly, picked up the resignation papers, and for a second, I just stared at the line where my name belonged. Funny thing is, I wasn't scared anymore. Not because I suddenly had a plan, because I finally understood something. Garrett thought he already won. Brooke thought I was broken. Everyone in that room thought they were watching the end. Nobody noticed my hand pause for less than a second before signing. Nobody knew the pressure sensor hidden inside that pen had already activated. Nobody knew that years ago, a friend built it as a joke, then modified it into something much more complicated. To everyone else, I had just signed my resignation, but my signature wasn't a signature. Not today. Today, it was a message. And the trap everyone thought I walked into had just closed around somebody else. The strange thing about having your life destroyed is that you never hear the exact moment people stop believing in you. Nobody announces it. Nobody sends a message. Nobody says, "Hey, Caleb." Everyone thinks you did it. It just happens. Quietly. And honestly, I didn't notice it right away. After Harbor Point, after the boardroom, after signing those resignation papers and walking out with that one cardboard box, the days started blending together. Not because I was heartbroken. Not because I was sitting around crying over Brooke. I was just tired. The kind of tired where your brain starts moving slower than the world around you. I would wake up and stare at the ceiling, walk into the kitchen, open the refrigerator, then stand there wondering why. Make coffee. Forget to drink it. Check my phone. Put it down. Pick it up again 3 minutes later for absolutely no reason. Little things. Autopilot things. The kind of things people do after shock rearranges something inside them. Then little things outside started changing too. One by one, a subcontractor I'd worked with for years suddenly stopped replying. A supplier became busy. Someone sent, "Sorry you're dealing with this man." I answered, "Nothing." No reply. At first, I kept making excuses for everybody. Maybe they're working. Maybe they forgot. Maybe Seattle hasn't heard yet. Because people do that. They negotiate with reality. They bargain with pain. Anything except accepting something terrible. Then one morning, I stopped at the same coffee shop near Harbor Point. Not because I wanted coffee. Habit. That's all. I remember standing there staring at the menu, even though I always ordered the same thing. Then the cashier looked up, smiled, then recognized me. And I swear, I felt it immediately. Not a big change. Tiny. Half a second. But half a second becomes a long time. When your life starts falling apart. She looked down, started pressing buttons that didn't need pressing, and suddenly, my stomach dropped. Because when people are hurting, they become weirdly good at reading faces. Tiny pauses, tiny looks, half seconds. Then I looked beside the register. Seattle Business Weekly, bottom corner. My face. Harbor Point architect under ethics investigation. And suddenly everything made sense. The silence, the unanswered messages, the weird pauses. Seattle already knew, and once enough people hear something, they stop asking if it's true. Then there was Brooke. Brooke didn't disappear. Actually, she almost looked happier. Photos started showing up online. Brooke leaving Garrett's downtown penthouse. Brooke beside Garrett at charity events. Brooke smiling from rooftop parties overlooking Seattle. Like she'd already started another life. Like I'd been erased from the old one. And honestly, I thought seeing that would hurt more. I really did. But by then, something strange had happened. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I was focused. Because heartbreak takes energy. Hatred takes energy. And somewhere between signing my resignation and sitting underground, I had run out of both. Then I heard paper slide across a table. I looked up. No windows. 3 monitors. Cold coffee. Stacks of financial records. Special Agent Miller sitting across from me. And for a second, I honestly forgot where I was. Because while Seattle thought Caleb Hayes disappeared, while Garrett thought he buried me, while Brooke thought I was sitting alone somewhere staring at old pictures, I was sitting with the FBI, following Garrett's money. Hours passed. Bank transfers, shell companies, fake vendors, routing numbers. Miller barely spoke. Just read reports. Typed. Read again. Then around 2 in the morning, he suddenly stopped moving. No typing. Nothing. Then he leaned closer to the screen. Tapped one transaction. Then another. Then another. Silence. Finally, he looked up at me and quietly said, "Caleb, I think Garrett has a much bigger problem." Then he turned the monitor. Garrett, Brooke beside him. Huge smile. Silver ribbon. Big headline underneath. Skyline Oasis, grand opening next Friday. Developer of the Year ceremony. I stared at it. Then Miller looked at me and said, "He's not hiding. He's celebrating." The strange thing about powerful people is that once they believe they won, they stop paying attention. After Miller turned the screen toward me and showed Garrett standing beside Brooke at Skyline Oasis, I kept staring at that picture longer than I should have. Garrett smiling. Brooke beside him. That silver ribbon. That Times Developer of the Year, Times headline. And honestly, the thing bothering me wasn't Brooke. Wasn't Skyline Oasis. Wasn't even Garrett. It was Garrett's face. Because he looked relaxed. Completely relaxed. And suddenly I realized something. I hadn't seen Garrett nervous once. Not in my office. Not during the Harbor Point board meeting. Not after framing me. Not while Seattle buried my name. Not even while shell companies connected back to him, one by one. Always smiling. Always relaxed. Always acting like tomorrow already belonged to him. Miller kept scrolling through transaction records. Typing. Stopping. Reading. No speeches. No dramatic FBI moments. Just work. Then after a while, he quietly said, "He's comfortable." I looked over. Miller tapped Garrett's picture. Comfortable people stop hiding. That was it. Then he went back to work. But I kept thinking about those words. Because suddenly I started seeing everything differently. Garrett drinking champagne in my office. Garrett pretending to feel sorry for me in the boardroom. Garrett standing beside Brooke, smiling every single time. And then I realized something else. Garrett didn't think I was dangerous anymore. He thought I was finished. He thought I was sitting somewhere alone, replaying Brooke in my head. Drinking, checking old photos, wondering where my life disappeared. And honestly, if our positions were reversed, I probably would have believed the same thing too. Then I looked at Miller and asked, "What happens if Garrett thinks I'm desperate?" Miller stopped typing. Actually stopped. Looked at me for a few seconds. No expression. Nothing. Then he leaned back slowly and gave the smallest smile I'd ever seen. Not happy. Not surprised. Just small. Then he said, "Desperate people ask for money." That was it. No explanation. No speech. But suddenly I understood. 3 days later, I sent Garrett one message. "We need to talk. Just us. No threats. No anger. Nothing." Then I stared at my phone. Locked it. unlocked it again, checked it, put it face down, picked it back up 30 seconds later. Stupid things. Waiting makes people do stupid things. 5 minutes passed. 10. 30. Nothing. I remember telling myself, forget it. I don't care. Then checking again anyway, because people lie to themselves while waiting. 6 hours later, my phone buzzed. One word. Location. And I remember reading it twice. Not because I didn't understand it. Because right then, I knew exactly why Garrett answered. Not because he respected me. Not because he was afraid. Because Garrett thought I had finally become exactly what he wanted. A desperate man, with nowhere left to go. The construction site sat on the edge of South Seattle. Half-built, concrete floors, steel beams, cold wind moving through unfinished walls. I got there early, walked around once, then twice. Not because I was nervous, because I needed time to become the version of Caleb Garrett expected to see. I loosened my tie, fixed it, then loosened it again, wrinkled my jacket, rubbed my eyes, looked at my reflection in a dark window. And honestly, I looked terrible. Perfect. Then a black SUV pulled into the lot. Garrett stepped out, looked around, saw me, smiled immediately. That same smile. And before he even reached me, I noticed something in his hand. His phone, already recording. The strange thing about traps is that people think the loud part is the dangerous part. It isn't. The dangerous part comes after. After the construction site. After the threats. After Garrett smiling into his phone while recording me like I was some pathetic man begging for scraps. Because honestly, after all that, I thought we finally had something. Not enough to destroy Garrett. Not yet, but something. The recording, the pressure, the mistakes. Finally, something. So when I got back underground, I expected movement, momentum, energy. Instead, I walked in and found Miller exactly where I left him. Headphones on, listening, typing, rewinding. No expression, just working. I dropped into the chair across from him and asked, "So?" Nothing. No answer. He lifted one finger. Wait. That was it. I remember grabbing the coffee beside me, taking a sip. Cold. Terrible. I stared at the cup for a second, then drank it again anyway. Because around 3 in the morning, tired people stop making good decisions. Hours passed, keyboard sounds, paper moving, air vents humming overhead. That strange underground silence where eventually you stop knowing what time it is. Then something happened. Not big, actually really small. Miller stopped moving. No typing. Nothing. And immediately I looked up. Because by then I'd learned something. Miller only gets quiet when something matters. For a few seconds he stared at the screen. Clicked, scrolled, read something, then read it again. Then finally asked, "Caleb, when you and Brooke were together, who handled taxes?" I frowned immediately. Actually frowned. Because the question felt random. Completely random. After Garrett, after Harbor Point, after shell companies. Taxes? I said. Brooke mostly. Silence. Click. Scroll. Then, did Brooke ever talk about buying property? And, honestly, I almost said no. Almost. Then, little things started showing up. Brooke sitting beside me scrolling expensive homes. Brooke suddenly caring a lot more about neighborhoods. Brooke saying, "Stop worrying so much about money. Things always work out. Tiny things. Normal things. Things that meant absolutely nothing back then. Until suddenly, they did." Then Miller slowly turned the monitor toward me. And I swear, for a second, I thought I was looking at the wrong screen. Because I expected Garrett. Fake vendors. Shell accounts. Money trails. Instead, I saw Brooke Carter. Tax records. Investment filings. Transfer reports. And sitting right in the middle, $1 million. I remember leaning closer, then leaning back, then looking again. Because my brain immediately started doing what brains do when reality gets ugly. Arguing. No. Maybe Garrett loaned her money. Maybe. Because even after betrayal, people still protect old versions of people they loved. Then I saw the date. And suddenly my stomach dropped. Not dramatically, just that strange empty feeling, like missing a step in the dark. Because I knew that date. I actually knew it. That was around the same time Brooke suddenly pushed harder for us to move. The same time she started talking about expensive neighborhoods. The same time she smiled at me and said, "Trust me, Caleb." Silence. Real silence. Then Miller looked over and quietly said, "Garrett didn't just move money through shell companies. He moved it through Brooke." And suddenly, I understood something Garrett never saw coming. Garrett thought Harbor Point destroyed me. Brooke thought she escaped with him. But somewhere across Seattle, without realizing it, Brooke had just become the first crack in Garrett's empire. And she had absolutely no idea her phone was about to ring. The strange thing about fear is that it doesn't make people stronger. It makes them smaller. Smaller decisions, smaller lies, smaller mistakes. And eventually, those small mistakes become the thing that destroys everything. After Miller showed me Brooke's federal summons, after the transfer records, after finding out she still hadn't told Garrett anything, I remember sitting there staring at my phone longer than I should have, because suddenly I wasn't thinking about Harbor Point. I wasn't thinking about Garrett. I was thinking about Brooke. Not the Brooke standing beside Garrett at Skyline Oasis. Not the Brooke from the restaurant. Not the Brooke from Harbor Point. Just Brooke. Brooke sitting beside me, late at night, scrolling through houses we couldn't afford. Brooke stealing fries off my plate and pretending she wasn't hungry. Brooke saying, "Stop worrying so much, Caleb. Things always work out." And honestly, that memory made me angry. Because suddenly I realized something ugly. Back then, she probably already knew something I didn't. Then Miller quietly asked, "Garrett still doesn't know, does he?" I looked up immediately. Because I understood exactly what he meant. Brooke never told him. Not about the summons, not about the IRS, not about the records. Nothing. Silence. Real silence. Then Miller leaned back and quietly said, "Scared people, stop following plans." That was it. No speech, no FBI lecture, just another sentence. But suddenly, everything clicked. Because I knew Brooke. Not current Brooke, the old Brooke. And Brooke never got loud when she panicked. She got careful. Too careful. She'd read text twice, lock her phone, unlock it again 30 seconds later, walk into another room before answering calls. Tiny things, fear things. Then I looked down at my own phone, picked it up, put it down, picked it back up. Because even after everything, my hand actually hesitated. Not because I still loved her, not because I forgave her. Because once upon a time, she was home. Then I opened a blank message. No greeting, no threats, no explanations. Just, "I have the original fingerprint extraction file. The original authorization order. Your digital approval is attached." Long pause. Then, "If Garrett sees what the FBI already has, you're finished." I stared at it. Read it once. Then again. Thumb over the screen. And I remember thinking something stupid. After this, there isn't a version of us left anymore. Then I pressed send. 5 seconds. Nothing. 10. Nothing. Locked my phone. Put it face down. Picked it back up. 20 seconds later. Anyway. Because waiting turns everyone into an idiot. Then, suddenly, my screen lit up. "Brooke, one message. What do you want?" I stared at those words. Read them once. Then again. Because right there, I realized something Garrett never saw coming. Brooke wasn't choosing between Garrett and me. Brooke was choosing between fear and survival. So I typed back, "Tomorrow night, Skyline Oasis Gala. Put Caleb Hayes on the speaker list. Do it quietly. Don't tell Garrett." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Almost a full minute passed. Then finally, "If I do this, you leave me out of it." And I leaned back in my chair. Because right then, Brooke made her first decision without Garrett. And somewhere across Seattle, Inside the biggest gala event of the year, lights were being tested, cameras prepared, VIP guests confirmed. Seattle's biggest stage was almost ready. And for the first time since Harbor Point, the trap wasn't waiting for me anymore. It was waiting for them. The strange thing about waiting for justice is that sometimes it looks exactly like waiting for a train wreck, because eventually, you stop wondering if it's coming. You just stand there waiting for the sound. That night at the Skyline Oasis Gala, I remember standing backstage staring at the monitor in front of me for so long my eyes actually hurt. Not Garrett. Brooke. I kept watching Brooke, because once upon a time, before Harbor Point, before Garrett, before all of this, Brooke was the first person I looked for in every room. Funny how your brain keeps old habits even after people destroy you. The Seattle Convention Center looked exactly like Garrett would have designed it himself. Expensive, perfect, glass walls, city lights, champagne, investors pretending not to network while networking, reporters pretending not to listen while listening to everything. That strange atmosphere where everyone smiles just a little too long. And standing near the front row was Brooke. Black dress, perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect from far away. But distance only fools strangers, not people who used to love you. Because Brooke had this thing she did when she was scared. Tiny thing, almost invisible. Unlock phone, read, lock phone, unlock again. Read the same thing twice. Like reality somehow changed while the screen was off. And there she was, doing exactly that, again and again. Tiny things, fear things. Then I noticed something else. Brooke wasn't really watching Garrett. Not completely. Every few seconds her eyes moved toward the entrance, then toward her phone, then back toward the doors. And immediately I knew why. Because people only keep checking doors for two reasons. They're waiting for someone, or they're terrified someone might arrive. And Brooke already knew something Garrett didn't. I was inside the building. My name was already on the speaker list, and Garrett had absolutely no idea. Then something stupid hit me. Years ago, Brooke used to do the same thing, sitting beside me in emergency rooms, waiting for updates about her mother, checking her phone, reading the same thing twice, pretending she wasn't scared. And for a second, I actually looked away from the monitor, because I hated remembering that. Then I looked back anyway. Because people do that. They look away from pain, then immediately look back. Then the room shifted. Lights lowered. Music faded. People turned toward the stage. Applause exploded. And Garrett walked out, smiling like a man stepping into the greatest night of his life. That same smile. Always that same smile. Phones came out. People stood. Cameras flashed. And I remember thinking something strange. He really believes this. He really thinks tonight belongs to him. Garrett adjusted the microphone, laughed softly, looked around, taking his time, enjoying every second. Too much. Then he started talking. Leadership, vision, responsibility, integrity. The same polished garbage powerful people always say when they want strangers to trust them. People nodded, smiled, clapped. Then Garrett's voice changed. Softer, slower, that fake, serious tone. Great projects require difficult decisions. Sometimes protecting the structure means removing weak parts. Small pause. Then, people without standards. People without ethics. People who become rot inside the foundation. And immediately, I smiled. Because everybody else heard a business speech. I heard Caleb Hayes. Then applause started again. But Brooke didn't move. No clapping. Nothing. Because right then, her phone lit up. And for the first time all night, the color disappeared from her face. Then Garrett smiled wider and raised one hand toward the giant screen behind him. And now, let's take a look at the steel framework presentation that made Skyline Oasis the safest development project in Seattle. The strange thing about waiting months for justice is that when it finally arrives, your brain doesn't celebrate. Not immediately. Because for so long, everything had only existed inside hidden files, inside recordings, inside evidence folders. Miller and I stared at underground for weeks. And after enough time, evidence stops feeling real. It starts feeling like numbers, screens, voices, not people. Standing backstage that night, I remember Garrett smiling and raising one hand toward the giant LED screen like a man introducing the greatest achievement of his life. Completely relaxed, completely certain. That same smile, always that same smile. After Harbor Point, after Seattle buried my name, after Garrett stood under cameras and called people like me times rot inside the foundation, he still thought tonight belonged to him. And honestly, that part almost felt unbelievable. Then Garrett smiled and said, "And now, let's take a look at the steel framework presentation that made Skyline Oasis the safest development project in Seattle." People clapped. I remember hearing glasses touch tables, phones unlocking, chairs shifting. Normal sounds. Really normal sounds. And that's what I remember most. Because for one final second, everything still felt normal. Then the screen flickered. Once. Twice. Tiny thing. Almost nobody noticed. Except Brooke. Immediately she looked up. Then toward the technical booth. Then toward her phone. Then back toward the screen. Again. And again. Tiny things. Fear things. Because Brooke already knew something Garrett didn't. I was inside the building. My name was already on the speaker list, and Garrett still had absolutely no idea. Then suddenly I remembered something stupid. Years ago, Brooke used to do that exact same thing, sitting beside me in hospital waiting rooms with her mother, checking her phone, reading the same thing, twice, pretending she wasn't scared. Funny thing is, people almost never change. Then I noticed something else. Brooke wasn't drinking. She kept lifting her glass, putting it back down, lifting it, putting it down. Not drinking, just giving her hands something to do. And for some reason, I looked down and realized I was doing the same thing, rubbing my thumb against my watch. Again, then again. Stupid things. Waiting makes people do stupid things. Then the lights cut out. Immediately, no warning, and for 1 second, the room made that strange sound crowds always make when nobody understands what's happening. Tiny voices, nervous laughs, confusion, then silence. Real silence. Then the screen came back on. And honestly, my brain didn't understand what I was looking at immediately. Not because the image was unclear, because it was too familiar. My office, late night, champagne, Garrett, Brooke, footage Miller and I had watched over and over, underground. Evidence. Real evidence. Then Garrett laughed. Not stage Garrett, not CEO Garrett, real Garrett. And suddenly his voice filled every speaker in the convention center. Caleb still has no idea. Laughter. Then Brooke, getting his fingerprint access was easier than I thought. Then Garrett. Once Harbor Point collapses, Caleb takes the fall. And I swear, I felt the room change. Not physically, just change. Like hundreds of people suddenly remembered they were breathing together. Nobody looked at the screen anymore. They looked at Garrett. And for the first time since Harbor Point, I watched his smile disappear. Not slowly, immediately. Then he looked toward the technical booth, then toward Brooke, then back toward the screen, trying to understand. Fear, things. Then suddenly he screamed, "Turn it off!" People started running. Security moved. Someone near the front dropped a glass. Garrett pointed toward the control room, shouting, "Shut it down!" And that was when I smiled. Because Garrett still thought he had a technical problem. He still thought someone pressed the wrong button. He still thought he was in control. Then the speakers answered, "Administrative override denied." Small pause. "Chief architect authorization active." And for the first time all night, Garrett finally understood something. Caleb Hayes never really left Skyline Oasis. The strange thing about watching someone lose everything is that the end almost never looks dramatic at first. For months I imagined this moment. Harbor Point, the boardroom, the resignation papers, Seattle, burying my name, Brooke standing beside Garrett, everything. And every version in my head felt loud. People screaming, security running, chaos, something. Instead, the first thing I remember was silence. Standing backstage, I kept staring at Garrett after he screamed, "Times, turn it off," and honestly thinking something strange. Why is nobody helping him? Because after everything Garrett built, after all the investors, reporters, board members, and powerful people he spent years collecting around him, I thought somebody would move. A lawyer, security, Brooke, anybody. But nobody did. Not really. The convention center suddenly felt smaller, heavier. Nobody looked at the screen anymore. Nobody cared about Skyline Oasis. Nobody cared about Steele reports. Nobody cared about the presentation. They looked at Garrett. Only Garrett. And suddenly I realized something. People don't stare at disasters. They stare at faces. Because everybody wants to know the same thing. What does someone look like the second they realize their life isn't coming back? Garrett looked toward Brooke first. Immediate. Instinct. Brooke looked down. No eye contact. No movement. Nothing. Tiny thing. Fear thing. Then Garrett looked toward security. Toward investors. Toward the technical booth. Toward reporters. Face after face. Searching. Waiting. Hoping. And then I noticed something stupid. He kept fixing his jacket. Again. Then again. Pulling his sleeve. Touching his cuff. Straightening nothing. Tiny things. Nervous things. People always touch something when panic starts. A watch. A ring. Their hands. Anything. Then suddenly he pulled out his phone. Actually pulled it out. Unlocked it. Looked down. Locked it. Unlocked it again. No message. Nothing. And honestly, that part hit harder than I expected. Because suddenly I remembered Harbor Point. Not the collapse. After. Sitting alone in my apartment. Phone beside me, checking it. Then checking it again. Pretending I wasn't waiting. Knowing I was. Because when your life collapses, your brain does something stupid. It still believes somebody's coming. Anybody. Then Garrett laughed. One weird laugh. Short. Uncomfortable. The kind people make when reality arrives too fast. Then, no. Quiet. Then louder. Then suddenly, "This isn't real. This is edited. This is a setup." He pointed toward reporters. Toward investors. Toward random people. Like his brain was desperately trying to find somebody else before it found the truth. Then the front doors opened. No dramatic entrance. No music. Nothing. Just opened. Then camera flashes started. One. Then another. Then more. Heads turned. Whispers spread. And I remember seeing Miller walk in first. Dark suit. Same calm face. Same expression I had watched for months. FBI agents behind him. No rush. No performance. Just walking. Garrett looked at Miller. And for the first time all night, he stopped moving. Stopped shouting. Stopped pointing. Because deep down, before panic arrives, people always know. They know. Then Miller stopped near the stage and calmly said, "Garrett Vale, you are under arrest for federal financial crimes, commercial fraud, conspiracy, and knowingly endangering public structural safety." Silence. Then chaos. Phones up, reporters running, questions everywhere, security moving. And through all of it, I looked at Brooke. Because Brooke wasn't looking at Garrett anymore. She was looking backstage, toward me, tears in her eyes. And, honestly, I wish I could say I smiled. I wish I could say I felt revenge. But I didn't. Because for the first time since Harbor Point, I wasn't watching the people who destroyed my life anymore. I was watching the people finally take them away. Then Miller quietly added, "The termination agreement is now under federal review and considered void pending fraud determination." And somewhere beneath all the noise, the room slowly stood up. Not for Skyline Oasis. Not for Garrett. For the man finally walking out of the dark. The strange thing about getting your life back is that nobody tells you what happens after the fight ends. Because for months, I thought everything pointed toward one moment. Harbor Point. Brooke. Garrett. Seattle burying my name. Miller. The evidence. The gala. Everything. I thought when Garrett finally disappeared through those doors, I'd feel relief, victory, something. Instead, I just stood there. I remember still staring toward the entrance long after the FBI agents were gone. Not because I cared where they took Garrett. Honestly, I think my brain just forgot what came next. Because for months, my life had become routine. Wake up, survive, find proof, stay ahead, expose Garrett, repeat, and suddenly, it was over. No warning, just over. Then I looked down and realized I was rubbing the corner of my event badge with my thumb. Again. Then again. Tiny thing. Human thing. People touch things when they don't know what to do. Watches, rings, sleeves, anything. Then I looked up and saw Brooke, still standing there, still looking backstage, still looking toward me, tears in her eyes, not moving. And immediately my brain betrayed me. Kitchen table, blueprints spread everywhere, cold takeout containers, coffee cups, Brooke asleep beside me while I stayed awake at 2 a.m. running Skyline, Oasis, structural calculations. Before Garrett, before Harbor Point, before Seattle. Funny thing is, memories never arrived during the war. Only after. Only when you're finally exhausted enough to feel them. Then Miller walked beside me. Same suit, same face, same calm voice, and quietly said, "They're waiting." That's it. 2 words. No speech. No dramatic moment. Just, "They're waiting." Then I looked up and realized nobody had left. Not investors, not reporters, not board members. Nobody. The room was still facing the stage, waiting, and right then I understood something. They weren't waiting for another arrest. They weren't waiting for another scandal. They were waiting for an answer. Because even after Garrett, even after Brooke, even after everything, there was still one problem left. Skyline, Oasis. Because Harbor Point wasn't the only thing Garrett changed. The steel core redesign, the structural downgrade, the shortcuts, the cost cutting, all of it was real. And for 1 second, I almost laughed. Because Garrett spent months destroying me to protect a project that I'd already quietly fixed. Not for him, not for the board, for the people who would someday live there. Before Garrett finalized my removal, and before the termination paperwork ever became official, I had already filed an emergency structural correction under my authority as chief architect. At first it was instinct, then it became personal. Not because Skyline Oasis still belonged to me, because people would eventually live there. Families, children, people who had never even heard my name. I used everything I had left. My savings, independent engineers, a trusted contractor Garrett never controlled. Miller knew. The documentation existed. The redesign existed. The reinforcement records existed. The building was already safe, 100%. Garrett spent months trying to protect a lie, without realizing the truth had already been rebuilt underneath him. Then I looked toward the podium, and for the first time all night, I felt nervous, real nervous. Because years ago I stood on stages explaining structures and engineering systems, but this felt different. Because I wasn't walking back onto a stage, I was walking back into my life. The strange thing about peace is that you usually don't notice the exact moment it comes back. 1 year after the gala, I was standing on the rooftop of Skyline Oasis watching the sunset disappear behind Seattle. And honestly, for the first few seconds, I wasn't thinking about Harbor Point. That surprised me. Because for a long time, Harbor Point had become everything. The collapse, the lies, Brooke, Garrett, Seattle burying my name, Miller, evidence folders, courtrooms, months of my life reduced to surviving. For a while, I honestly thought those things would stay in my head forever. Turns out, they didn't. Not completely. I looked down over Skyline Oasis, lights glowing through hundreds of windows, families eating dinner, children running through the courtyard below, people carrying groceries home, people living ordinary lives, real lives. And funny enough, that hit harder than becoming CEO ever did. Because 1 year earlier, that building wasn't a building. It was betrayal, it was evidence, it was anger, it was Garrett. Now, it was just home. For thousands of people, the way it should have been from the beginning. I remember leaning against the rooftop railing and noticing something stupid. My coffee had gone cold, completely cold, and I drank it anyway. Then laughed. Tiny thing, human thing. Because a year earlier I never let coffee go cold. Back then I checked emails while eating, read reports while walking, answered calls at midnight, always preparing for the next problem, always expecting impact. But somewhere along the way, that version of me disappeared. Not all at once, quietly, the way healing usually happens. Then I looked beside me. New engineers, new partners, people who stayed late because they cared, people who argued honestly, people who never made me prove my worth twice. No Garrett, no Brooke, no hidden agendas. Just good people, healthy people. The board had made me CEO months earlier, but the title mattered less than the people standing beside me. Garrett and Brooke eventually received 10-year federal sentences. People still asked me afterward if I hated them. Honestly, I thought about that question longer than I expected. Because hate feels powerful at first. Then one day you realize carrying people who broke you becomes heavier than leaving them behind. Miller once told me something after the trial. People think healing arrives dramatically. Most of the time, you just realize you stopped looking over your shoulder. Standing there, above Seattle. I realized I couldn't remember when that happened. Couldn't remember the exact day. Couldn't remember the exact moment. I just knew it did. Then I looked out across the city one last time and thought something simple. Trust builds everything. Buildings, friendships, families, lives. And when trust breaks, sometimes rebuilding it takes longer than rebuilding steel. So, let me ask you something. If someone destroyed your life, and years later truly regretted it, would you forgive them? Or are some doors supposed to stay closed forever?